I've told you this before. We've talked about it, and I've said it on many programs. The first time that I really thought about this was with Bishop SHEEN, with Archbishop SHEEN.
Yeah.
The retreat that he gave for priests, he talked about Gideon.
Yeah.
And he talked about how God formed Gideon's army.
Right.
Right. The first thing he said, I don't want you to have too many soldiers when you go to war because you'll think that you won it on your own power.
My goodness.
So now he said, tell the cowards to leave.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
How many were there? More than half of them left.
Yeah.
Were cowards. God said it's still too numerous, right? Well, my whole point in this, you can go back and read the story of Gideon, which is a marvelous story itself. The whole point is this. We are being brought to the point that only, let me underscore that word, only divine intervention can get us out of this colossal disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Only. There is no other option. And I'm telling you, there is no other option. With everything that has been done to the church in the last 50 years, but the last 10 years especially, and with the College of Cardinals now being rigged, because it's rigged, the whole thing is rigged, it's stacked against anything orthodox happening. Everything is 100%, and it has to be that way. It has to be completely impossible to cure, so that God will intervene and cure it.
I love it.
So that we can see his power. We can certainly say we had nothing to do with it. We couldn't come up with a solution.
Yeah.
We couldn't come up with any solution. We had our backs to the wall. God came in and took care of the problem, and we'll see that happen.
Charles, didn't Henry Newman express a concern in the 1870 when the infallibility of the Pope was defined, and saying that there's a possibility that people might misinterpret this document to mean that anything the Pope says goes? Do you recall that? Is that a historical fair statement?
He certainly did. And it was a danger. In all likelihood, if Vatican I had been allowed to continue, we would have seen the other half. We see the extent of papal power. That's great. What are the limitations? Unfortunately, the council didn't get the chance.
Nope.
So, and the other thing, too, was that from that time until Vatican II, the Pope was the leader of the Catholic people in the struggle with the anti-Catholic state.
Yes, that's true.
And so you very much, and this is true whether it was communist or fascist or Nazi or capitalist.
Yeah.
Whatever the case, he was the embattled leader of the faithful remnant. And we had Pope after Pope who could play that role very well, though, as we saw with Pius XI, not always skillfully.
Yeah.
So that brings us, though, to where we are today. And I have to say that there's a great deal in this pontificate that leaves one, at the very least, to scratch one's head, not to tear one's eyes out, which I don't recommend, by the way. The latest development, of course, has been the Bishop Strickland affair.
Of course.
And, again, we've got to remember that when we have bad popes, when we have good popes, when we have any kind of pope at all, there is an overarching intelligence over all of this. And by that I mean divine providence.
Right.
When we get bad leaders, and that's true not just in the papacy, but at all, they are a punishment. They're not a blessing. So if we look at the current pope, or any pope, and consider there's something lacking there, if he's Stephen VI, if he's Julius III, we have to ask ourselves, well, why are we being punished? And I don't mean to say, why are you punishing me? I mean, what have I done, or what have we done to merit it? And I think the rapid passage of pro-abortion constitutional amendments in various states are a slight indication of the fact that we are a corrupt generation.
Absolutely. Every state, we're seeing that we lose every time right now when it comes to the pro-life question. And it's pretty obvious that the majority of people in America have no concern about life in the womb.
And you can extend that to any country you like. Yeah. It's not just us. So I think in a certain sense, if we have a problem with this Pope, we have received a Pope after our own hearts.
Here's the thing. What Bishop Strickland was correctly identifying was this, and this is what has upset me and most people that I know tremendously in these last years. We are being presented by the hierarchy a different Christ.
Yeah.
Not just a different religion. It's certainly a different religion. There's no question of that. But it's a different Jesus Christ. Yeah. I listen to these people talking. I read what they write. I read the encyclicals. This is not the Jesus Christ that I know, that I've dedicated my life to, exactly, that I love. This is not him. This is I don't know who this is. And I'm being expected to toe the line. I'm being expected to buy all of this as if it were some wonderful private new revelation. It is not a private new revelation. It's older than sin. It's older than sin. It's heresy.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. Now, what Bishop Strickland was told by the papal. Do people understand what the papal nuncio is?
This is the Pope's representative.
This is the voice of the Pope to a country.
I hear you.
There is no such thing as the deposit of faith. Well, excuse me. If what he's saying is that everything from the time of the apostles up to this moment doesn't exist.
It's crazy.
It doesn't exist. We're starting all over again. No, wrong. I don't care if you're the nuncio. I don't care if you're a cardinal. I don't care if you're the Pope.
Right.
It's wrong.
Right.
And nobody can do that.
Right.
You cannot do that. Just as you cannot take pieces out of Scripture. You cannot manipulate Scripture. You cannot change it. You cannot alter it. You cannot force it to say what you want it to say and not what it is saying.
Yep.
You cannot do this. All right. This is the situation we're in, which we go right back to the first point, Terry.
Yes.
It requires divine intervention. There's no other way to get out of this.
No, that's right.
It's important to realize, because when you look at the checkered history of the Catholic Church, it has to be borne in mind, again, that it is not simply a whole bunch of things that happen. Yeah. It is a combination of what the people of God need at any one given moment, or what they deserve, or actually the combination of the two. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we deserve, and dare I say it, need punishment.
Yes, of course.
And this is all foreshadowed in the Old Testament,
right?
Because the kingdom of Israel is the foreshadowing of the Catholic Church,
right?
And the people of Israel, they were quick to sell out the covenant whenever they could. Well, so too the people of the new Israel, I'm sorry to say.
So how does God bring good out of evil? Because that seems to be an axiom through history.
Well, first and foremost, he does it through individuals. Mm-hmm. At any given moment in the church's history, saints are being made. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, these are often martyrs, whether wet martyrs who, are slaughtered by some nasty regime, or in some cases, even by churchmen, mm-hmm. thinking of St. Joan of Arc.
Of course.
Or there are dry martyrdoms, wherein decent, holy people are hounded to their graves by bad governments, or, dare I say it, sometimes by the church.
It happens.
It does happen. And it's not a good thing. It's not a happy thing. But it's not, again, what is important here is the salvation of the individual.
Yes.
He's saved through the church.
Right.
He's saved through the sacraments. He's saved through the dogmas of the church. He's saved through the church. But he is not saved by the churchman.
Right, exactly. Good distinction.
It's very important. A French theologian, I forget which one, made the comment that the church is not the mystical body of the Pope.
Great point.
I think that's very true, not least because popes vary.
Right.
Most popes have been good to mediocre.
Yeah.
You've had a few who were, like Pius XI is actually one of my favorite popes because some of his writings.
Yeah.
He wrote some of the best things any modern pope ever wrote. And unfortunately, he did, through a lack of political awareness, he did some really bad ones. I think abandoning the Cristeros in Mexico probably wasn't a smart move.
Well, what about when the Cristeros were told by the Vatican to lay down their arms because we're going to negotiate a deal, and then they get slaughtered? Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember it all too well. It's precisely what I'm referring to.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
And of course, you know, there you see a pattern that happens over and over again in church history where that was a very well-intended pope.
Yes.
Who just didn't know what he was doing politically.
Right.
And the result was an utter disaster. But you have had a few, thank God, mercifully few, popes who were just evil.
Yeah.
Just plain out evil. And one of my personal favorites of these was Stephen VI. And the reason why I mention him is because everybody has heard of the disgusting chapter where he had his predecessor dug up.
Yes, that's a classic story.
Yeah, everybody's heard that one.
Yeah.
What they don't realize about it is that far worse than just the disgusting nature of the thing was the judgment on him.
Yeah.
Because, number one, there were two conflicting parties in Rome at the time. One of them, the semi-good guys, and the other, the really bad ones. They didn't call themselves that, but we can.
Yeah.
So the semi-good guys had brought Formosus in from another city and elected him as pope. That was the first time a bishop of another city had ever been elected Pope of Rome. Never happened before.
Wow.
So the bad guys get their man, Stephen VI, elected after Formosus dies. He has this mock trial, which everybody knows about, and then he declares, A, since he was bishop of another city, he was never legally or validly bishop of Rome. He was the state of a contest in retrospect.
Yeah, really, back then.
Yeah. And also, I mean, if he was right, if you can't be a bishop of another city and validly be pope, then the state of a contest actually missed the bus a long, long time ago, back in the 800s.
That's true.
Anyway, the other thing, though, was that on that basis, and this is the worst part of it, he decreed that all of Formosus's doctrinal deeds were sacramental actions were invalid.
Wow.
Now that was heresy then.
Yeah.
And it's heresy now.
Sure.
But in the practical sphere, all of the priests he ordained and all the bishops he consecrated were deposed. Now, his successor said, no, just kidding. It's all nonsense, obviously. And everything went back to normal. But then a few pontificates later, Stephen's disciple, the head of the gang, was elected Pope Sergius III. And he said, no, just kidding. Stephen VI was right, et cetera, and all those guys were invalidly ordained and consecrated. And that ushered in the 80 to 100 years of church history they call the pornocracy.
Wow.
This was a terrible time in the history of the church.
Yeah.
Now, why do I mention it? And I also have to point out that terrible as they were, the patriarchs of Constantinople had no trouble with the papal primacy at that era, which is something Soloviev points out. But we'll leave it alone. Point is that you can have a perfectly valid pope do terrible, evil, and even heretical things. But no pope will ever try to define a heresy. But unfortunately, over the past 200 years, especially because we've had a succession of really good popes up until relatively recently, you had a sort of creeping infallibilism where people came to think that anything and everything a pope did was covered by it. And when the time came that you started getting popes who were doing things that couldn't possibly be perfect, this led to people saying, well, he can't possibly be pope, which is true if you think the pope's perfect. But that's where we are now.